was able to secure for a client through nothing really that special. Yes, this client is very interesting. They do very fun work, but the effort involved to getting them this placement in Forbes magazine was nothing that you honestly can't do yourself. And that's kind of our dirty secret of PR, is that anybody can do it. It doesn't take anything special. We happen to have the time and the resources to be able to do it well because we're a firm, but you can do it too. And I am going to show you how. So by the end of this conversation, you're going to know the media you need to contact, how to find them, what you need to say, and how to make money for your business, because that's why we're all here. We wouldn't be in business if we didn't need to make money. So that's what this is all about. But let's talk about the 5 steps to get these kinds of placements, and then even, do you actually need them? So the first is, think about your objectives. Think about the reasons why you might want this PR, and that'll help guide the next steps that go after that. The next step is craft a killer media list. We have something in the industry called spray and pray, and that's when you distribute your news out to the 500 reporters that you have in some aging, outdated Excel spreadsheet, and that never works. That's a waste of time for you, and it's a waste of time for the reporter. The next is start the relationship. This is very important because we have a reporter friend of ours who works at a publication called The Verge. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of The Verge before, but it's a big tech startup publication. One of the reporters tweeted, on a quiet day, I get 400 pitches from people just like me, people trying to pitch their business. And he doesn't have time to read all those emails. So starting the relationship is a bit of an art, because you only have about 20 seconds to really nail it and make that impression. The next is follow up. And we'll talk about why this is important, but you wouldn't believe the sales cycle for PR, if you want to call it a sales cycle. You wouldn't believe how long it is compared to how long you probably think it is. We'll talk more about that later. And finally, getting the ROI. How do you make all of this actually matter to your business? So when we think about our objectives, I gave that example of the boss coming to you and saying, I want to be in Forbes magazine because I want to be able to call my mom and say, hey, look, mom, I'm in Forbes magazine. Well, is that really an objective that is worth your time? For us, we think about objectives in 3 big ways: boosting sales, reaching partners, and recruiting talent. And there's a bunch of different offshoots of these objectives. For example, for a day like today, getting attendees for an event. If you are Studio Live, you want to get attendees for an event. That's kind of similar to boosting sales, a little bit different, but that's just an example there. So again, but all of these objectives, you want to relate them back to your broader marketing and business goals. So the boss comes to you, I want to be in Forbes. You work at a coffee shop in New Wilmington, Pennsylvania, and you say, I've been doing a lot of marketing research. This is our marketing plan. Our goals do not involve reaching people on the national level in Forbes magazine. I don't know that that ties into our business objectives, which involves getting people in a 35-mile radius of us aware of our business. So with these objectives in mind, always relate them back to, how does this tie into our marketing strategy and our business strategy as a whole? Cool. So I just spoke a lot there. So I'm going to pause for a moment and just see if anybody has any questions they want to give in the chat or anything, or if I'm okay to move on. Good. All right, let's move on. So again, like I mentioned, here is an example of an objective that you might have. Oh, we do have some questions in the chat. Okay, so, okay, no. So we have, feel free to put questions in the chat. Yes, that's true. Feel free to put any questions that you would like in the chat. But so we have this other example of an objective that you might have, which is to reach partners or investors. And so here's a company that I found, Ohio's Penguin City Brewing, and they got this new huge space. They got this publication in something called Craft Brewing Business. And this is something probably not going to be their main customer who's reading this, unless their main customer is really, really obsessed with coffee, which they might be. or I'm sorry, not coffee, with craft brewing. And they might be, but that's not the typical audience that this kind of publication would attract. This would attract people who might be partners, maybe they're equipment dealers or investors. So you can see already there's two different objectives that you can get with a PR placement just by putting it into different types of media. And then the other objective with PR is recruiting talent. And I want to be a little bit careful here because not every time that you need to recruit talent do you need to be in CNN. But for this particular company, this is the face of a guy who works at a company called Juggerbot 3D. And they make 3D printers, which have a lot of engineering components. A lot of professors from all over the country are involved in this kind of research. So getting this kind of placement in a publication like CNN was probably helpful. I don't know, I haven't talked to them about this, but I could imagine that it would be helpful for this purpose. And again, any one of these three kinds of objectives, you could get through many different types of placements. It all just depends on what your particular business goals are. So that leads us to, we have our objective. We either want to recruit people for our business, we want to boost sales, or we want to reach out to those people who we want on our radar, but who we wouldn't be able to access otherwise. So the way that we can think about that is there's like 5 main types of targets. There's national, and these are all the ones that you would be excited to call home to your mom about and say, hey mom, look, this is where I am. Trade publications, we kind of talked about with that craft brewing business one, where these are the publications probably not going to be your end customer necessarily. It could be, especially if you're like a B2B business, but these are mostly going to be the people that you want on your radar, maybe to partner with or to have invest in you, that kind of thing. Local, that's pretty self-explanatory, but those are, the ones that are in your immediate hometown, maybe your region, depending on what kind of marketing audience you're trying to go after. And then podcasts are an interesting one because they're a little bit newer of a platform. I think I saw a stat that in 2018, only 36% of Americans knew what podcasts were, but now it's 32% of Americans report listening to a podcast at least once a month. So it's an exploding medium, a lot of activity going on there. And what's really exciting about that one is that it's super highly targeted. So you can be on a podcast that only has like 20 listeners, and that might not seem that impressive to you, but all those 20 listeners have taken the time to actively consume that content. And so they're high intent buyers. And so these are the people who they're passionate about what they're listening to. And if you're on that podcast, they're probably going to be passionate about whatever you're talking about. And then the final one, and this one also gets a little bit murky because it could get into the realm of like advertisers or influencer marketing, but there are occasions where you can do public relations through influencer relationships. And here's an example. If you are in the content marketing world, you're probably very familiar with Moz. They're a big blog for the marketing community. And I could foresee an instance where you're able to get a guest post onto the Moz blog. It's an unpaid opportunity, which is the big thing with PR, by the way, that differentiates it from advertising, paid versus unpaid. And there's pros and cons to both, but that's just the main difference there. So if you were to get a guest post in Moz, their blog, that could be a great opportunity for you as well. So how we come across these opportunities is, first of all, by just being observant, by just paying attention to the world around you. You can find a lot of shockingly good ways to connect with the people and the publications and the reporters even that are in your space that are worth talking to. And then you can also scour your competitors' news pages. And so this could be an example of, I want to be, I am a coffee brewer in New Wilmington. I don't know why I keep going back to that example, but I am. So I'm a coffee brewer. I want to know every piece of press that Branch Street Coffee, which is another local coffee producer, I want to know every single piece of press that Branch Street Coffee has been featured in, because odds are if that publication cares about Branch Street, then they'll care about me too. So that's a way that you can do that. And then a lot of your competitors, a lot of the time, sorry about that, will, let's go back, they will share publications that they've either been featured in or that they find interesting on their social media. And so by following your competitors on social media, that can be a clue as to who might be worth reaching out to. And then finally, two tools that I really like are Google Alerts and Twitter Topics. And these are ways that you can synthesize huge amounts of information. With Google Alerts in particular, think of it just like keyword research. If you are a marketer, you're very familiar with keyword research. Think about the things that if you were a consumer of your product or your service, you would be typing into Google. And the same thing applies for Google Alerts. So just as an interactive activity, what is an example of some keywords that people have in their business? Does anybody want to throw something in the chat?
Someone should answer. Let's see.
All right, well, if nobody has an answer, I will go ahead and give an example. And this is just going to be something really simple because I think Google Alerts is amazing. And so you can watch me in real time as I set it up myself. So here we're going to go just very easily over to Google Alerts. Google Alerts. Cool. And then you see all these different keywords here that you can type in. So let's say I'm a coffee shop owner. I want to type in Arabica bean coffee. There we go. So I want Arabica bean coffee to be my Google alert. And when we go there, we can see, oh, there's no results yet, but there will be some in the future. And what it'll do is it'll give you a massive list in an email form that shows you all of the different news stories that have that keyword in it. So that's just another way to know which publications are worth targeting and then which reporters are worth targeting as well. So let's get back to our presentation. All right. So now that we know the objective, we know the publication, how do we actually get in touch with these people, right? Because how do you go from being the person who has the idea to get on Forbes or TechCrunch or even a local publication to actually making it happen? And thankfully, it's pretty easy to get in touch with a lot of these people. Reporters want to be accessible to regular people. It's something that a lot of them take pride in. So a lot of them will have their emails very easily accessible. And sometimes it's as simple as going to their author page. So if you go on to techcrunch.com, this is a publication that we work with pretty regularly. And one of their reporters is a gentleman named Jonathan Schieber. And if you just go to his author page, here's Jonathan. Here's his bio. Jonathan is an editor at TechCrunch. And then at the very bottom, it says he can be reached at schieber.techcrunch.com. So already, boom, there you have it. You can just gear up an email, fire it off to Jonathan, and you, without any special credentials or any kind of fancy degree, can be directly in touch with a reporter at TechCrunch yourself. Pretty cool. So another way that you can do that, if they don't have the information in their author bios, and a lot of them don't, is you can head to the footer of an email or a website, and it'll have the information for like a general email inquiry. So you go down to the bottom of the website, and this is, you've probably seen bottoms of websites plenty of times. This is what it looks like. You can go to either the Contact Us section, Contact Us section or the About Us section. And a lot of times those will have the email for like a info at or contact at or general at. And so you cannot imagine how many times I've actually gotten very meaningful, significant placements by using that email address. You don't think that it would work. You think, oh, nobody's listening to this, nobody cares. But actually they do, and they do respond. So don't discount that. The same is true. Also, sometimes you'll get this Contact Us form and you think, oh, this is a waste of time. It's not worth me filling this out. But actually I have managed to get a lot of meaningful placements that way too, and start a lot of good reporter relationships. So don't discount that as an option as well. And then finally, what you can do, I think I saw another stat that said 80-something% of reporters are very active on Twitter. It's their way of being able to communicate with people, share their stories, understand kind of what readers are thinking about their stories. So if you aren't on Twitter for your business's purposes, maybe it's not a good channel for them, but you are thinking of maybe trying to get some PR for your business, try exploring Twitter, because even your local reporters, I actually follow a lot of local reporters like Jess Harden at Mahoning Matters, a few others, and they have very robust, interesting Twitter platforms. And so you can go on there and look into their Twitter bios, and those will oftentimes have their emails accessible there as well. So you can see we don't really have to spend a whole lot of money. It just takes a little bit of elbow grease and some research, and you are able to get in touch with a lot of these journalists yourself. However, if it does come down to there's just no email address available, you're scratching your head, but you need this one reporter's email address in order to make your business goal actually work, you can use a paid service. This is one called Hunter. I think there's another one called Leadbox, but it allows you to pay a small subscription fee that can allow you to access a lot of these emails as well. So you can just do your research on different pricing platforms or email service platforms and figure out if one of those is a good option for you too. Cool. So this is the part where I was going to do a demonstration where I was going to find a reporter for somebody who had something in the chat, but maybe people in the chat are a little bit shy. So we are just going to move on to starting the relationship. And again, I mentioned this is very important because you only have about 10, 15, maybe 20 seconds at max to get your reporter's attention, for them to think about why you matter and why you matter right now. So the way that we want to do this, first of all, is thinking about how not to do it. And I will show you an example. So this is an email, right? You've all seen emails hundreds of times, I'm sure. So I don't need to necessarily school you in how to write an email, but this is the way that we think about how not to do it. So first of all, you would think this is very basic, but I cannot tell you how many times reporters have come to me and said, this is low, not to me complaining about my work, but come to me complaining about reporters or PR people in general, because of course I would never do this. But if you leave the name section, especially if you're doing like a mail merge or a RAM or whatever, and you don't take the time to make sure that that reporter has their name personalized, they're just going to delete it. If you can't take the time to make sure that it's personalized to the reporter, they're not going to take the time to read it. So that's just number one, cover your bases there. Second, there is too much jargon in this pitch. We're creating a platform that revolutionizes the synergies of connected communication. What does that mean? Nobody knows what that means. Even if you are the marketing person who came up with that, you probably don't even really know what it means. We all speak marketingese because we think that, you know, that's the language of our industry. But when we take our marketing hats off and we think about, does this make sense for the average everyday person? I read that journalists, they typically write to about a 6th grade level because they want to be able to make sure that everybody, even people who don't have high school degrees, are able to read what it is they're writing. So they are going to be instantly turned off if you can't communicate your message to the level that's on the realm of a 6th grade education. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that is important to remember is that you want to tie it very, very high up in your email to why it's important to the reporter. This here are sleek automation tools, yada, yada, yada. This sounds like somebody who took their sales enablement email or their marketing email and just tried to make it fit to a reporter. That doesn't work. You probably know all about, targeting your specific audiences. Maybe you have certain messaging for people in this region versus that region. The same is true for reporters. You have to refine your messaging based on the audience that they are. And they're a very different audience from who is going to be buying your product. You need to convince them why this matters to them. Here, you have this hard sell. And this can work sometimes, especially if you have breaking news. You want something that you really, really need to get out, a big event. It can work. But what we try to emphasize at Propeller is that public relations is all about relationships. That's why it's called public relations. You want to start by not trying to get the reporter to do this hard sell, but rather initiate a conversation, show them who you are, show them what you're about, and then allow that to slowly and naturally and authentically lead into a meaningful relationship that can be useful to both of you later on. And then finally, you have this big block of text here. What is it talking about? It's just more salesy marketing jargon. It's too long, it's too much, and nobody understands why it matters. Why does it matter now? What is the point? So this is how we don't want to do these kinds of emails, pitches, as we call them in my industry. But there is a lot that we can do that makes it much, much simpler. So here's how we want to do it. If you notice on the very front, it's much more concise. This is 3 blocks of text, not a whole lot of words. And that's pretty much all you need. You don't need something that has 5 paragraphs in an essay form that explains all the benefits of your company. Something very simple like this will do, and probably do much better. The other thing is, of course, we have it personalized. It's concise. It's simple. This is language that somebody very easily could understand. So this company, I made them up. I've never. This is actually, I think it would be like a good idea for somebody. So somebody should make this company, but I made this up. But so the point is that it's explained in terms that somebody could easily understand. It doesn't take a whole lot to be able to get through this. And then you talk about why it matters. This person has some big milestones. They just acquired some big customers. There's some numbers here, and then you relate it back to the reporter's work. I know you covered this, so I thought it would be good to talk to you. And then finally, when we talk about relationships, showing something that shows that you've taken a little bit of time to understand the reporter, do your homework. That can go a long way in just establishing that relationship as well. I happen to love the Great British Baking Show, so if somebody were to pitch me about that, I would be like, oh my God, let's talk. You like the Great British Baking Show too? Great. So, and this is a pitch example that I give when you are really, really like good with your targeting, with your objective. This is a real actual email that I sent to a real actual reporter at the WSJ, and it was 1 sentence long. And the difference is that you don't want 1 sentence long emails if you're doing that spray and pray strategy that I talked about. But if you have done the pre-work of thinking about your objective and finding an incredibly, incredibly on point target, you can get away with firing off a 1 sentence email. And this person immediately responded with wanting an interview. So it can work, but only if you've done that preemptive strategy behind it. Okay, cool. So I'm going to pause there again and see just how I'm doing, how we're feeling.
Looks like we got a couple questions.
Okay, great. Let's see here. And I was able to view the chat, but somehow.
If you press escape.
Here we go. Okay. So, which way do they usually prefer? Oh, yes. Okay, that's a good question. Overwhelmingly, in my experience, people prefer emails. A lot of reporters don't respond to phone calls on the first pass. It's kind of like us nowadays. Like none of us pick up the phone if it's an email or a number that we don't recognize. I think the same is true for reporters. They're just people. Oh, and that's something that I also really want to emphasize with this when it comes to that public relations thing. The people behind these email addresses, they are real people. And so just always keep that in mind when you're reaching out to a reporter. There is a human behind this email address that I need to be talking to. But that's a little digression. The point is, email overwhelmingly works. Reporters love email. The only other caveat I would say is reporters also love Twitter. And if you can find a meaningful, intentional, authentic way to engage with them on Twitter, that is also a fine way to reach out, as long as you don't make it the core of your strategy. And so let's see. search Twitter topics. Yeah, so the way that I search Twitter topics is that if you literally, okay, so let's see, we have remodeling. Um, hmm. Remodeling might be a little bit difficult because it is true on Twitter, people aren't talking about that much. But let's see if we can do like a live demonstration of how that would look in practice. Okay, so we go on Twitter, we're searching Twitter. Let's search for, maybe not remodeling, but let's search for, what's a common term that people talk about? Fixer-upper, maybe? Fixer-upper. Okay, so here we have fixer-upper, and then you can see there's like all these hashtags here that talk about fixer-upper, and latest, these are really good for looking at certain trends. Some of these are going to be ads, but a lot of them, they'll give you some indication as to what people are talking about. I don't know who Rustic Pelican is, but there's a lot going on there. Yeah, and so sometimes you will see that there is a worthwhile news article that is related to your story. It does look like we might have to do a little bit more keyword research for this particular topic, but it does help you, like, for example, if you go to People, there are sometimes journalists who write about this kind of thing, and you can look at their bios and say, oh, okay, this is somebody that I want to reach out to. They talk about fixing up homes. It could be a journalist, it could be a blogger, but just somebody who's worth reaching out to in your space. So there's that example there. And not, I mean, yeah, depending on the industry that you're in, it may not always work because not every medium is good for, or every business is good for Twitter as a medium. But that is something that you can use for a lot of businesses for sure. Cool. Well, thank you so much for these questions. That's great. Okay, so let's just really quick, let's see how, I think I have like 10 minutes left. Is that right, Katie? Okay, awesome. So now,
Sorry, I was on mute.
What's that?
I was on mute. I said, if you go longer, that's okay too.
Okay, yeah, cool.
Right at 12:45.
Cool. All right, so let's get back into presentation mode here. All right, so the follow-up. This could, in many ways, be more important than the email itself. Yes, the email that you write is very important, the first pitch, but the sales cycle, like I said, for PR is surprisingly longer than you think. So what a lot of people do is they'll send an email to a journalist, and because they think the news is this very fast-paced industry, an hour later, they'll send another email and they say, hey, did you get my email? We're not talking about that kind of follow-up. A reporter would get kind of creeped out if you did that. But if you think about it, if you are in the sales world, it takes about 8 touches on average to get a sale. It's a little bit different in PR, probably not 8. We stick to around 3. And we found that that's pretty effective for us. And the way that we typically do it is about 36 hours after your first email, feel free to get another one. Like I said, on average, a high-level reporter, they're getting about 400 pitches a day on a quiet day. So just give them the grace and the time to get through that. And then you can feel free to follow up after that initial one, after that initial follow-up, every month or so after that. And you would be amazed how it feels like you're just speaking into a void. You're talking to the dark. If you're sending an email once every month and you hear nothing back, but I did this for a reporter at our local paper, the Chicago Tribune, emailed her every month for I think like 6-7 months. And finally on the 7th month, she responds to my email and she says, oh, thank God, this is perfect. This is exactly the story that I'm working on. And she already knew everything about my client because I had been emailing her consistently that whole time. And so we were able to set up the interview just like that. Took a matter of minutes, and it turned into an amazing story. So don't get discouraged. Now, after like a year or 2 and still nothing, or maybe a year, that's probably a fair point to decide to break it off, because by that point it's probably just eating into time that you could be reaching out to more responsive reporters. But just realize that it is okay to to continue those follow-ups, as long as it's done in an authentic way. And again, this is something that you don't want to do just very obnoxiously, like, hey, did you get my email? But something where you can actually add value to the reporter. So for example, you can give them more information about your company. Maybe you've hired somebody new, maybe you've like gotten a new product, or maybe you've noticed something in their field. Maybe this has nothing to do with you, but you've noticed, okay, maybe you are a pizza shop person and you're trying to get a placement about your pizza company, and you notice that cauliflower crusts are becoming a big thing. And so you message a reporter and you say, hey, like, I noticed cauliflower crusts, like, here's my thoughts on this. What do you think? And again, it's the people behind these emails. This is just a way to establish rapport, relationship, and that's what we're really trying to do there. And then finally, if you're really trying to go for something where you are trying to be like a thought leader, for example, you want people in your space to know that you're an industry leader in your field, you can respectfully disagree with the angle that a reporter took in a piece. Now, I wouldn't, blast the reporter with a bunch of hate mail saying, oh, this was terrible and you were completely wrong about this. But if you find a way to offer a perspective to a reporter that maybe they weren't thinking about before, maybe there was something they didn't consider, and you manage to lay out that case in a respectful way, they can really respect that sometimes and appreciate the fact that you're giving them some information that they wouldn't have thought of otherwise. And that can also lead to a good relationship. That can also lead to a great placement as well. Cool. So finally, we're talking about converting those can people see this? Probably not. All right. So converting those PR wins to marketing goals, because that's what we're all here to do, right? To make money, to stay in business. So what does the PR mean for your overall business strategy? And so one of my favorite people who talks about content marketing and PR is a guy named Crestodona. I can put his name in the chat later, but I did put his link to his website here. It's a firm called Orbit Media. I think he's amazing. I think he just has so many valuable insights, but he talks about, he used to notice that when he would get a piece of press about his company, maybe somebody did a profile on Andy Crestodona, the marketing guru, there would be this huge hit in traffic the day that the piece ran, and then it would go back to normal. And there really wasn't any long-term boost or any huge gain in traffic or SEO that he noticed or probably just traffic. I don't want to get into SEO yet, but that he noticed from that placement. So he and we at Propllr often think about, well, half of the value of PR is what you do with that placement after it runs. Yes, you get a ton of value and visibility and credibility when it does run, but then what you do after that is equally as important, because otherwise you're leaving a lot of value and frankly, a lot of money on the table. So one way that you can do this is update your press page. And maybe you might be a company that's too small to have a full press page. But if you are a company where you can see this does add value to your business, this is an example of a company, one of our clients who I think just has like a very nice press page. And you can see it's all like laid out very nicely. They have all their links, all their logos to the publications. They have the headlines, and then they have like a little teaser that shows what the article is all about. And people who maybe are unfamiliar with their company, with your company, they're trying to understand if it's legit, they can go on to this kind of press page and they can see, oh, okay, these people, they really know their stuff. They're interviewed by all these big publications. And then the other thing that does help with, and I do want to be careful with this because a lot of people do think of PR as kind of like a link building exercise where you're trying to get a bunch of high authority links and that feeds into your content marketing. It can, but that is not the point of it. If your whole purpose with PR is to get high authority links, just work on SEO and don't try to do PR. But PR can help with high authority links. And so you can easily, if you're trying to think about that, you can go onto like Hrefs and you can check the domain of a publication and see, oh, okay, this is a high authority publication. This is probably worth our time because this will be good for SEO purposes. But again, I want to caveat that it's not just for link building purposes that you want to engage PR, but it can help. Okay, so let's talk about adding an as seen in logo to your website. And again, this is particularly if you have press that you think is really relevant to your audience. Here, this is somebody who thought that these top tier publications were really relevant to their audience. In this specific case, they're personal financial advisors. So a lot of people have like a very high trust barrier when dealing with their finances. They want to know that the person they're dealing with is legit. And so these top tier publications are a good way to establish trust for people who might just need that little bit of a nudge to go over the edge. But it doesn't necessarily have to be top tier publications. It's whoever you think your audience would care about to read. So if you are a craft brewing business and craft brewing business magazine features you and you think that that's important for your readers or for your website visitors, go ahead and feature that all over your page, all that you want, because that will add some value to you as well. And then finally, we talked about how journalists are on Twitter a lot. And so if you tag the reporter on Twitter when you're sharing that placement, you get two goals accomplished with just one action. And the first is you're sharing that with your community. If you are on Twitter, if you're on a different social media platform, because that makes more sense for your business goals, you can also share that placement on that platform. But Twitter works particularly well because the majority of reporters are going to be on Twitter. So when you tag that reporter, like this company did here, this is the reporter, this is the reporter's publication, it just is one more opportunity for you to establish that relationship with the reporter, because they know, oh, okay, this person is sharing this story. They're getting more eyeballs on this story. And the way that a journalist stays in business is they get eyeballs on their story. So they're going to appreciate you helping them. And it's a win-win situation for everybody. And then you can also, again, depending on your business, but you can add the link to your latest news in your email signature. And this works especially well if you're like in sales and you're communicating with somebody who, maybe they don't trust you, maybe they've heard of you for the first time. They can say, oh, look, Jillian was in such and such publication. That's pretty good. That means that she's somebody I can trust. So that's just something else that you can do. And then finally, you can train your sales prospects, or you can do it yourself, to just type up a quick email to maybe people that you've been trying to get as a sale. And they might just need a little bit more of a nudge as well. So here's one that I just made. This is the CEO, Janet Jackson. She was on this podcast. And this guy, Bill, he was having issues with top of the funnel. There's a lot of leaks in his funnel. And I don't know how many of you guys are in digital marketing, but if you are, then you're very familiar with that. If you're not, then you just know that it's a common business problem in the digital marketing space. So this guy says like, hi, Bill, I know in our last conversation, this is something you were struggling with. Our CEO, she was just on this podcast talking about that very issue. So then you make sure that you include the link and then point out exactly to that person, this is where I think you would really find this interesting. And that's just a really good way to continue to monetize that placement with people who they might not see it in your other channels, like your potential prospects. They're probably not maybe going to be following you on social media, but they are engaging with you in an email. And so that's a very personalized way to just relate that placement that you're getting back to somebody who could be a potential sale for you. Cool. So that is all that I have for my presentation. How is everybody feeling? Does anybody have any questions for me? Anything that maybe you want me to clear up? Anything like that?
I was thinking leave the last couple minutes for all the attendees, but I guess I just wanted to thank you. I learned so much from you because at my job, I reach out to local news stations because we have 9 different offices in different states. And I always reach out for press releases.
Amazing.
And if they want to help promote us. So I took notes on how to send an email. So
that's great. That's always good when even the host is taking notes. That's a good sign.
Yeah. Does anyone
Um,
have any questions that they want to put in the chat, or if you want them to be anonymous, you can press the question and A.
yeah. Maybe just for the last minute, since I was going to do a demonstration, and I can just go ahead and do that now, but I could just show you very simply and easily how you can go about finding this. Okay, so let's say my business is coffee. Okay, well, I was already searching this, so that it's already pre-populated. Just ignore that. But all right, so oh look, here's Barista Magazine. It's listed as one of the top 5 coffee magazine's publications, and this is like a very preemptive, quick search. You can obviously take more time to do more in-depth searches, but let's go to Barista Magazine. Oh, okay, look, there's Barista. Um, and what we talked about is a lot of times you're going to find the contact information in the about section. So we can just go there and let's see, contact Barista Magazine. Okay, so we have this contact form. That's pretty good. But if you scroll down a little bit, you see, oh, there's these email addresses. And if you don't feel comfortable with filling out the contact form, you can also do that. But it's even better when we talk about personalization, if you're able to reach an actual person. So maybe if you see a contact form coming up, think to yourself, is there a step further I can go to in the personalization process so that this does reach a real actual human? So if we go to the about page, we can see, oh, look, here's the Barista Magazine team. And then you might have to do a little bit of scrolling, but you can see down here at the bottom, email Sarah at editor@baristamagazine.com. Or let's say, there's a different reporter. Maybe you notice that Katrina wrote a story that aligns much more with the kind of coffee shop that you run. And so you think that, oh, she's probably an even better target than Sarah would be. So let's go ahead and email Katrina. So that is just an example of how to do just that basic level of contact and outreach to reporters. So in summary, anybody can do it. Anybody can get a quality placement if it makes sense for you. And you can do it pretty simply and easily just by using these tools here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nobody has any more questions over here? At least we got a couple.
Yeah, that's great. And of course, I am totally free to talk later to anybody who might have other questions about this. Always excited and happy to nerd out on PR to anybody who wants to. So thank you so much, Katie, for this conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone for attending. And then hopefully we'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, cool. All right,
Good.
bye.
Have a good weekend. Bye.
Bye.